of a growing populist pop culture movement, reports Axios' Steph Kite and Sarah Fisher. Another recent hit is Jason Aldean's controversial song, Try That in a Small Town, which takes a shot at crime in the city. One key to these songs' success, a thumbs down from mainstream media and left-leaning groups. That kind of judgment only nudges tracks higher in the charts and engages voters ahead of the 2024 presidential election. That's it for this week. Axios Today is produced by Fonda Mwangi, Lydia McMullen-Laird, and Robin Lynn, along with our sound engineer, Alex Sugiura. Alexandra Botti is our supervising producer. Asia Whitaker-Moore is Axios' executive editor, and Sarah Kailani Gu is Axios' editor-in-chief. I'm Naila Boodoo. Stay safe, enjoy your weekend, and we'll see you back here on Monday.
Got a business problem? There's a TED Talk for that. Stay updated on everything business on TED Business, a podcast hosted by Columbia Business School professor Modupe Akinola. Every week, she'll introduce you to leaders with unique insights on work, answering questions like, how do 4-day work weeks work? Will a machine ever take my job? Get some surprising answers on TED Business, wherever you listen to podcasts.
Hi, it's Phoebe. If you've been thinking about joining Criminal Plus, now's a great time to sign up. From now through September 15th, we're offering 20% off of annual memberships. You'll get access to bonus episodes, exclusive merch, virtual events, and more. And you'll be supporting our work. You can learn more and sign up at thisiscriminal.com/plus and use the code +- at checkout. That's code +-, all one word, for 20% off an annual Criminal Plus membership. Thanks very much.
Donald Trump is facing 91 felony charges across 4 indictments, but one charge in Georgia stands out.
The RICO case against Donald Trump in Georgia involves 19 defendants. And when you have a case involving 19 defendants and the wide range of crimes that they've been charged with committing, it creates all kinds of complications.
The ins and outs of RICO cases and what this could mean for 2024. This week on The Weeds.
The nature in Iceland is very dangerous. You know, wherever you are, whatever time of year, if you go up into the highlands, which, you know, most of Iceland is just the highlands, and we just live sort of on the coastline. But if you go up to the highlands by yourself, whatever time of year, even in the height of summer, nature can be very cruel.
Lawyer and writer Ragnar Jónasson.
It's a dangerous place to be if you don't know what you're doing. And that's like I think a common theme in a lot of the crime fiction in Iceland.
Iceland is a dangerous place, but crime is incredibly rare. There were only 4 homicides in the entire country last year, up from just 2 in 2021. What do you think makes Iceland such a good place to set crime fiction?
I mean, it is the contrast. You know, you have this snow covering the whole, you know, country, and then you have this one drop of blood, you know, and the contrast in that is quite strong. And that's, you know, this place has the appearance of you know, it's the most peaceful country in the world, and so you know, crime stories set here, of course, create an interest.
People in Iceland love reading crime fiction, and they love writing it too. Even the Prime Minister of Iceland recently wrote a crime novel. So we got on a plane to talk with her about it, and to figure out why in a country where the biggest threats are things like strong winds and getting lost, everyone is so interested in crime. I'm Phoebe Judge. This is Criminal.
Sure this is the right way?
I think that's it right there.
Where? Right there. You're kidding.
No.
On a rainy day this past spring, criminal co-creator Lauren Spohr and I were in Reykjavik, trying to get to our meeting with the Prime Minister.
Next to the Punk Museum?
Yeah, absolutely.
The Prime Minister's office is in a plain, white building downtown. You'd never guess it was the office of one of the most important people in the country. There's no fence around it, or guards outside.
Right across from the Hard Rock Cafe.
Oh, it is across from the Hard Rock Cafe. You can get out of America.
Prime Minister Katrin Jakobsdottir has been in office since 2017. Before that, she was the country's Minister of Education, Science and Culture. She's also the chairperson of the country's left-green movement. But she's always been interested in crime. When she was elected, the New York Times wrote, "A pacifist environmentalist, an expert on Icelandic crime thrillers, emerged on Thursday as Iceland's new prime minister."
Before I became a politician, I studied Icelandic crime fiction, and what I think is interesting is that we have relatively many people writing crime fiction, and they are very different.
We talked with the Prime Minister in a sitting room in her office. It was incredibly casual and relaxed. Iceland is one of the safest countries in the world. It's #1 on the Global Peace Index. Most police are unarmed. And in the entire country, there are only 5 prisons, which can hold 150 people total.
I think the interest in crime in Iceland is maybe because we have been so privileged that crime isn't really very common here in Iceland. So we like to read about it. And I think sometimes it's an interesting opposition, really.
The Prime Minister's book is called Reykjavik. It's about a young girl who goes missing in the 1950s from a remote island called Viðey off the coast of Reykjavik. The Prime Minister co-wrote it with Ragnar Jónasson, who was there with us at the Prime Minister's office. He's a best-selling crime writer, and he started a crime writing festival called Iceland Noir. He met the Prime Minister a few years ago when they were both on a committee judging the best translated crime novels in Iceland.
I mean, I'd known for a long time that she wanted to write a book. I mean, and then I just had this idea, why not do this together? And so I just asked her, should we do a crime novel together? And I wasn't sure she would say yes, but she did. And then I wasn't sure she would actually go through with it, but she did.
Ragnar had an idea how it would all begin, what would really be the start of the book. But this young lady disappearing from this island very close to Reykjavik. And I think that's something that Icelanders relate very strongly to, because even though we don't have a lot of crime, we often have people disappearing simply because of the very tough natural circumstances. We have the ocean around us where people disappear, we have people simply getting lost in the wilderness, etc. So we also have kind of a dark thread there, which is something that we used.
Icelandic crime fiction is part of a whole genre of crime novels called Nordic noir, set in the countries in and around Scandinavia. The genre is often described as bleak and gritty. It includes books like Stieg Larsson's The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, which became the first ever book to sell more than 1 million ebook copies. In 2010, The Economist wrote about the phenomenon of crime novels coming out of Nordic countries, writing, quote, "The protection offered by a cradle-to-grave welfare system hides a dark underside."
I think the societal structure is also interesting because, and I think that's of course the reason that Nordic noir is popular, because it is set in a Nordic welfare society, which is interesting for an author to probe under the surface and find really what's happening beneath the surface in a Nordic welfare society. And we have many stories that revolve really around that things aren't as good as they look.
and even the way it's interesting to have the crime fiction come out of this country. I mean, the prison system here is so different. The gun violence is so different. I mean, it's so interesting that you have such a wealth of crime fiction coming from a country which handles crime pretty well, I would say, compared to the US, and there's major differences here between the two countries.
Yeah, well, we really think of crime as a societal issue and not the issue of each individual. So, and I think the reason that where societies don't have a lot of crime is that they are relatively equal and inclusive. That's my political vision. But I also think that the changes that happened in Icelandic society after World War II, because before that you could say that Iceland was mainly a rural society, and then we have the making of a city here in Reykjavik, and a new kind of societal structures appear, which make Iceland really a perfect setting for crime fiction. Even though it's a small country, you can't really know everybody in this new society of a modern city.
Many Icelandic crime novels are set in Reykjavik, including those by one of the most famous Icelandic crime writers, Arnaldur Indridason. He started writing crime fiction in the late 90s after working as a journalist. Before his books, people thought that crime stories set in Iceland didn't really work because it's so safe there. He once said in an interview, "This is the challenge you're faced with, to be realistic and believable. You can never use easy solutions, solve the matter with a gunfight. You need to burrow into the characters, look for a psychological, intrinsic solution, rather than an external, explosive solution." The Prime Minister wrote about his work for her master's degree dissertation, and about how early crime fiction from outside of Iceland helped influence modern-day Icelandic noir.
It's interesting that when we see the crime fiction really being born as a genre with Edgar Allan Poe and Arthur Conan Doyle, etc., those stories and books are translated into Icelandic very quickly, just a few years after they are published in the native language. So obviously there was a very strong interest in this new trend here in Iceland from the very beginning, and we saw Icelandic novels being published that were kind of, imitating this new genre. We have actually a story called An Icelandic Sherlock Holmes, which tells a story about an amateur private investigator, etc. So I think we were pretty quick to really discover this trend and making our own version of it. But still, I would say that the crime fiction genre didn't become acceptable in Iceland until maybe around the year 2000, when it became really acceptable and part of a very strong literary genre here in Iceland. Before it was considered to be more, lowbrow, exactly.
But I think we can even go back further. I mean, to the Icelandic sagas. I mean, from the Middle Ages. Some of those stories really are crime thrillers, even like legal thrillers. So we have this very strong heritage dating back centuries of writing crime fiction in a way.
The Icelandic sagas were written about 800 years ago. They tell the story of the people who settled Iceland, often following them for generations, and are written almost like modern novels in a simple, straightforward style. They're about families, conflict, and everyday life.
And I think that's also part of why we write and read so much, because our heritage is the sagas much more than like anything else. I mean, we don't have this, that other nations have heritage of architecture or art in a way from that period. I mean, we have the books, we have the stories.
We'll be right back. Support for Criminal comes from Rocket Money. Rocket Money can help you find and cancel your unwanted subscriptions. Canceling subscriptions to things you don't use or want anymore can be one of those things that goes on your to-do list and never gets crossed off. And you end up paying month after month without meaning to. With Rocket Money, you don't have to dig around for an old password or go back and forth with customer service. They'll notify you if you're paying subscription fees and then let you cancel with a click of a button. Rocket Money also helps you monitor all of your spending in one place, recommends custom budgets, and can even help you lower your bills. Stop throwing your money away. Cancel unwanted subscriptions and manage your expenses the easy way by going to rocketmoney.com/criminal. That's rocketmoney.com/criminal. rocketmoney.com/criminal.
We all know that feeling of finding yourself stuck on the side of the road or struggling to get your vehicle running. But now you can avoid that pain by getting your vehicle the parts it needs before that breakdown oh no moment. With eBay Guaranteed Fit and over 122 million parts and accessories, you can make sure your ride stays running smoothly. For the parts and accessories that fit your vehicle, just look for the green check. Get the right parts, the right fit, and the right prices. ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only, exclusions apply.
The Prime Minister of Iceland has said her background in crime fiction helped prepare her for her role in government, saying that it, quote, is about not really trusting anyone, and that's generally how politics works. She's also said, every politician needs to have something to take his or her mind off the daily business of politics. She's described crime fiction as, quote, very therapeutic. One of her favorite authors is Agatha Christie.
She has been very influential, but then I read everything, Raymond Chandler, Dashiell Hammett, Dorothy L. Sayers, etc. I read all of those, so I really, it's so, and when you have read so many crime novels, it's so enjoyable when you kind of find one that you don't see through and you're actually surprised when the ending comes.
People in Iceland read a lot, an average of 2.3 books every month. On Christmas Eve, there's a tradition called the Christmas Book Flood. And there's an Icelandic saying that everyone gives birth to a book. The phrase literally translates to, everyone has a book in their stomach. It's reported that 1 in 10 Icelanders will publish one in their lifetime.
People tend to think that it's kind of normal to write books.
How do you find time? Both of you do other things, obviously. How did you find time to write? Did you write at night? Did you send chapters back and forth at night after the...
Alright, where is this place?
It's over?
Well, it took a long time. We were writing this book for 2 years.
Yeah, more than 2
plus
years.
more than 2 years, because we don't have any time. But obviously during the pandemic, the routine was a little bit different. So that created some time, at least for me, who normally
Take the next left onto Moser Court.
is out on meetings every night and meeting people, which you didn't do during the pandemic. So
In 1,000 feet, turn right onto Hamilton Enterprise Park Drive.
all of a sudden, instead of just watching Netflix or something to relax, we were creating our own story.
But it was obviously a little bit,
Take the next right onto Hamilton Enterprise Park Drive, then continue straight to stay on Hamilton Enterprise Park Drive.
a strange experience to do this with the Prime Minister. When I called her, to ask how this chapter was progressing, and that chapter she was having meetings with the Prime Minister of Britain or the heads of states all over the world, and it's a strange.
Continue straight to stay on Hamilton Enterprise Park Drive.
How conversation to have. You know, I jump out of this meeting with the Prime Minister of the UK to speak to you. And
In 400 feet at the traffic circle, take the second exit onto Gilmore Road.
I mean, how do you respond to that? That's just like it's a bizarre scenario.
It requires a lot of patience, obviously, for the co-author. But it was, but the thing was, I would never probably...
Exit the traffic circle onto Gilmore Road. Continue on Gilmore Road for 3/4 of a mile.
Written it alone, because he kept pushing it really until we had a finished manuscript. And even then I said, okay, here we have a manuscript, it's probably not good enough. So the biggest surprise for me was when actually we were in the process of saying, okay, it's going to be published. Then it became very real. And then I got a little nervous.
Yeah, that was probably the only point, only times he got really mad at me during this process was during the editing, because I hate editing books. So I was
in a 1/4 mile, turn right onto Princeton Road.
Stalling on that, writing something else, and then I got this call from the Prime Minister one day last summer, and she was angry at me. She was like, "You need to finish this editing so we can move on." And that, again, that's a new experience to get like a call from the Prime Minister of your country, telling you off a little bit. So.
But I would be the same,
Turn right onto Princeton Road.
It doesn't matter if my job doesn't matter, because this is just who I am. Keep calling people and telling them what to do.
Are you ready to write another one?
No, not ready.
In 1/2 mile, use the left 2 lanes to turn left onto Ohio 4 bypass north.
Of course we are, yeah.
I'm not saying it won't happen at some point, but somehow time has been filled with a lot of stuff. so no, we haven't started that.
No, we haven't started, but it's an ongoing conversation. Basically, me saying that we should start it, he's saying no, but I think we'll figure it out.
There was one other person I wanted to talk with about crime and crime fiction in Iceland. His name is Peter Guðmundsson, and he deals with both. How many people do what you do in Iceland?
I'm pretty much the only one. Most of the time, it's just me.
Peter Guðmundsson is a forensic pathologist who works in Reykjavik. Before he took the job a few years ago, there were no forensic pathologists based in Iceland at all. He and a colleague, who flies in once a month, handle all of the autopsies done in the entire country, which has a population of about 380,000 people. Do you know any other countries where there's only one forensic pathologist?
No. No westernized countries, at least, I think.
He and his colleague work with the police to investigate sudden and unexplained deaths in Iceland. Although murders are rare in Iceland, he says suspicious deaths are more common. At least
use the left 2 lanes to turn left onto Ohio 4 bypass north.
Double the homicide rate.
So our role in the investigation is, of course, also like ruling out homicide when something appears to be a homicide.
What is your day? What is your typical day like? I mean, I assume you're not working on any homicides today.
No, not physically, but we have had some homicides. In June we had 3 homicides. So there's a lot of work involved in these cases, even if you're not standing and autopsying them. But the normal day is I come in and there is, people have died.
Continue on Ohio 4 bypass north for 1 mile.
Brought here, and the majority of the day is, of course, standing with the bodies and the autopsy. And at the end of the autopsy, you can say it's it was that kind of force. It hit him in that place, and it went through this artery, released this amount of blood, and that's the way the person died. You have you have built up the whole chain before your eyes. The chain of causation. That's the job, and it's really interesting sometimes coming in and seeing what's happened. And of course, usually, if there is something interesting, you see it.
In half a mile, turn right onto Ohio 4 North, Hamilton Middletown Road.
Before you come in, that something has happened, some big accident or something.
And because you're the only guy there, you know you're probably gonna get to see that individual at some point.
Turn right onto Ohio 4 North, Hamilton Middletown Road.
Yeah, exactly. So if you're having a nice weekend at home or something and you're hoping for a weekend.
Continue on Ohio 4 North for 5 miles.
It's a weekend or easy following week at work, and then there is on the news car accidents and whatever. And you know beforehand that your week won't be as easy as you hoped for. So, because it's also such a small country that everything makes headlines, you know, small happenings.
Peter Guðmundsson became Iceland's only forensic pathologist in 2018. And then he started getting questions from Icelandic crime writers. What types of questions do they ask?
You couldn't really generalize anything because the nature of the questions is most often that they are really, really specific. It's like how long does it take to die if half of your body is immersed in 7-degree cold water, and so on. And how does a body smell that has been confined in a metallic tank for 17 years? So it's very specific questions.
He told me he's even gotten questions like, can a dead body make a sound or change position? Eventually, he got so many questions from so many writers that he decided to just teach a class on it.
In the last 3 years, I think I'm right. I have had every fall and every spring at least one course, and it has been close to full or full. So, I mean, criminal writers, they have a serious interest, a professional interest in forensic medicine and pathology for their profession. So I offer them a chance for starting with the basics to gain insight into what we are dealing with, how we think, what are the problems, what is difficult, what is easy, what can we say, what would we be able to say, and so on.
Do you get the sense that these authors are really trying to get the details right? You know, that the people who come to your workshops, your lectures are there because they want to make what they're writing as realistic as possible, that really matters to them.
Yeah, I've had conversation with authors that are really ambitious to having it right, like it is in reality, and I'm sitting there and talking to them, and they
There's a speed trap ahead.
They have like this divine power of fiction in their hand. They can take and they can say whatever they want, and I tell them, you don't have to keep it like it is in reality, because you can write whatever you want, and it surprises me. That's the thing. It surprises me that authors, when they get stuck in this fixating on the problem of writing like reality, because it's a kind of a backwards thing if you just think about it, because they are writing fiction.
Why do you think? I mean, there's so few violent deaths, murders in Iceland. Why do you think that crime fiction is so popular there?
Yeah, it is a very, very popular genre here in Iceland, as well as in tropical Nordic countries also. I think people are somehow drawn towards the subject, and they find it interesting. Why do people die? Who done it, and so forth.
I mean, maybe people are even more interested in it there because they see it so rarely.
Yeah, I know what you mean. Like if you have a homicide here, it is despite how like unusual or interesting it really is, then it will make headlines in every media, of course, and everyone will know about it within like 45 minutes or something. It's a small community, it's true, and people are interested in it if there is like evil or something bad happens, or so it's close to them.
He told me he personally doesn't read much crime fiction.
I don't. I've read a few of the Icelandic authors, and yeah, I think I get plenty of death and all these things during the workday.
You've seen enough.
Yeah, I think so.
We recently spoke with the Prime Minister of Iceland about her new crime novel. Did she ask you any questions?
No.
Well, I think she's maybe going to write another one, so she might call.
Oh, nice. I look forward to it.
Reykjavik, a crime story, written by Prime Minister Katrín Jakobsdóttir and Ragnar Jónasson, will be out in the U.S. this September. Criminal is created by Lauren Spohr and me. Nadia Wilson is our senior producer. Katie Bishop is our supervising producer. Our producers are Susanna Robertson, Jackie Sachiko, Lily Clark, Lena Sillison, Sam Kim, and Megan Kinane. Our technical director is Rob Byers. Engineering by Russ Henry. Julian Alexander makes original illustrations for each episode of Criminal. You can see them at thisiscriminal.com. And if you're a fan of crime fiction, you might enjoy Phoebe Reads a Mystery, a show where I read classic crime novels. Our latest book is The Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. I've also...
In a quarter mile, use the right lane to take the Ohio 63 ramp to Monroe, Lebanon.
Read books like Arthur Conan Doyle's The Adventures of Sherlock Holmes and The Mysterious Affair at Styles by Agatha Christie.
Use the right lane to take the Ohio 63 ramp.
You can listen back through our entire catalog, 25 books total, and look out for new books coming soon.
Continue for 3 miles.
And if you want to hear Phoebe Reads a Mystery or any of the shows we make with no ads, check out Criminal Plus. Learn more at thisiscriminal.com/plus. We're on Facebook and Twitter at Criminal Show and Instagram at Criminal_podcast. Criminal is recorded in the studios of North Carolina Public Radio, WUNC. We're part of the Vox Media Podcast Network. Discover more great shows at podcast.voxmedia.com. I'm Phoebe Judge. This is Criminal.
Join the Wall Street Journal online October 12th for WSJ Pro Sustainable Business Forum and take away practical advice on how to build a sustainability strategy that's right for your business. From now until September 21st, you can save 25% on your ticket by registering at wsj.com/sustainablebusiness. No code required. That's wsj.com/sustainablebusiness.
Here's your money briefing for Friday, August 25th. I'm Ariana Asperum from the Wall Street Journal, filling in for J.R. Whalen. The after-school 3 p.m. pickup isn't the end of the day for many students. Now, more parents are opening up their schedules and their checkbooks for extracurriculars. The
The end goal is, of course, to expose kids to new activities, get them to come out of their shell, and even get them to dive into something that they're interested in. But the majority of parents who do put their kids in these extracurriculars do hope for some kind of return of investment.
We'll speak to Wall Street Journal personal finance reporter Oyen Adedoyan after the break.
My early Alzheimer's diagnosis was hard to take, but it gave my mom and me more time to plan together.
Talk to your family about seeing a doctor. Go to alz.org/time to talk. A message from the Alzheimer's Association and the Ad Council.
With back to school season in full swing, parents are spending big on music lessons, sports, and other after school activities. Oyen Adedoyan from the Wall Street Journal's personal finance team joins us. So Oyen, growing up, lots of us played a sport or took some piano classes after school, even going into high school. And extracurriculars have always played a role in things like college admissions. So why are they becoming more important now?
It's a combination of things. For one, standardized test scores like the SATs and the ACTs are carrying a lot less weight in the college application process now. And college admissions consultants are saying that the Supreme Court's June decision to outlaw affirmative action may put even more pressure on non-academic activities like those extracurriculars you were talking about, including skills and sports. Even after-school programs that are usually more affordable have also been having trouble even keeping up with demand in recent years. And that's leaving a lot of kids out.
How much are families spending on them?
According to a recent survey from Lending Tree, families are spending upwards of $700 per kid on extracurriculars a year. But that's even on the low end for some
In half a mile, turn left onto Cincinnati-Dayton Road, North Main Street.
Families that are employing private coaches or even shelling out for lessons and competitive travel teams as well.
So $700 per child per year is on the lower end.
Yeah.
And if you have multiple kids,
it can get even more expensive, even, well into the thousands.
Take the next left onto Cincinnati-Dayton Road, North Main Street.
Per year, wow. So what types of activities are seeing this increase in spending?
Competitive sports like cheerleading, fencing, and even golf and soccer are seeing increases in the number of kids that are involved, and those kids are starting at younger ages. We're also seeing this in the arts. Parents are paying more money for private art coaches or guitar lessons, and this is something that increased a lot following the pandemic.
And it seems like it's limited based on what time and money a family can set aside for this, right?
Financial advisors told me that while this is something we've always seen in more affluent families, other families that are more middle or low income are blowing their budgets on this, and they're even going into debt. In a recent study of about 6 million college applications from researchers at the University of Maryland, it showed that wealthier students and private school students, as well as white and Asian American students, reported more extracurricular activities, and more awards, as well as more top leadership positions in those activities. So that shows that these are students that have been well involved in things over time.
Continue on Cincinnati-Dayton Road for 1.5 miles.
What are some of the benefits that parents are hoping for here?
The end goal is, of course, to expose kids to new activities, get them to come out of their shell, and even get them to dive into something that they're interested in. But the majority of parents who do put their kids in these extracurriculars do hope for some kind of return of investment, whether that means their kid gets an elite college scholarship or they get some kind of career opportunity out of this.
Return on investment on your kid, that's a funny
Exactly.
way to put it.
Yep, the ROI.
So you spoke to financial planners and some parents who are actively doing this. What did they recommend for how people can predict and sort of get ahead of these costs?
Well, they said to expect costs to rise every year, no matter what the activity is, and that's definitely what we're seeing in the data. But they also recommended that parents be proactive. One financial advisor sets aside $300 every month for her kids' extracurriculars, and if that money isn't all the way used one month, then it rolls over into the next month. Financial advisors also recommended getting things secondhand from parents who have already had their kids go through a sport or activity. But this isn't the end all be all. At the end of the day, it's an extra expense, and some parents don't believe that it's necessary. Sarah Eros, one of the parents that I spoke with for this story, told me that she never wanted her daughter to feel overwhelmed with extracurricular activities because she knows that children can have a perfectly great life if they don't do anything extra.
Did you do an extracurricular? What was your extracurricular of choice?
My extracurricular activity was cheerleading, and funny enough, I had to stop a couple years in because I wanted to get a part-time job. So it's definitely one of those things that in high school, you know, the kids that have been doing this for years and they have certain skills, and it's definitely an extra cost if you want to get more advanced in that thing.
That was Wall Street Journal personal finance reporter Oyen Adedoyan. And that's it for Your Money Briefing. I'm your host, Ariana Asparu. Our supervising producer is Melanie.
In a quarter mile, your destination will be on the left.
Aisha Al-Muslim is our development producer. Scott Salloway and Chris Zinsley are our deputy editors. And Philana Patterson is the Wall Street Journal's head of news audio. We'll be back with a new show on Monday morning. Thanks for listening.
This message comes from NPR sponsor MassMutual.
Your destination is on the left.
Don't let the day-to-day of running your business keep you from planning for tomorrow. Start preparing for the future. Talk to a MassMutual financial professional today. Feel comfortable about tomorrow.
You're listening to Shortwave from NPR.
Hey Shortwavers, Aaron Scott here.
And Regina Barber. And Elsa Chang.
Elsa, thank you for stepping away from your hosting responsibilities on All Things Considered.
You're so welcome.
We have you here today to talk through some of the latest science headlines that we've been reading up on.
No problemo. I heard that we're talking about the recent attempted moon landings. Yep, and recreating a classic rock song from Brain Activity.
And finally, what tar pits from today can tell us about wildfires thousands of years in the past. You're listening to Shortwave, the science podcast from NPR.
There's a new way to support this show and public media. Please consider signing up for the NPR Plus podcast bundle. NPR Plus listeners get to
Give this AC some time to catch up and cool down the car. Man. It is 92 outside, high humidity. I'm here at Figleaf Brewing in Monroe, Ohio. We had a Maps and Taps kind of happy hour, I guess. Just a gathering of GIS people and some planning, city planning type of people. Somewhat talking about maps or just chit-chatting, having a drink, I guess. Depends on the group you're surrounded by. Alright. Man, these glasses are oily. Stand by. Oh, pretty good start to the weekend. Got a couple of gin and tonics. My favorite simple drink. Now homeward bound. Figleaf Brewing. Not bad. Kind of a warehouse with some seating.
employee owned and operated. Their mattresses and box springs are hand built at their factory in Fairfield and sold directly to the customer at 9 original mattress showrooms located throughout the tri-state and Dayton. For store locations and to learn more, visit originalmattress.com.
On the next Living on Earth, methane being 80 times stronger than CO2 as a global warming gas when first emitted, and it's setting records.
This most recent surge is significant on top of a set of increases that we've been looking at in the past decade.
Hi, I'm Steve Kerwood. The fight to save the climate from methane. Next time on Living on Earth from TRX.
Sunday mornings at 11 on 91.7 WDXU and 88.5 WMUB.
91.7 WVXU Cincinnati and 88.5 WMUB Oxford. News from Cincinnati Public Radio and NPR.
Today on Reveal, the police said high school football star Billy Joe Johnson shot himself during a traffic stop.
I heard a gunshot in the glass break. I looked up and saw him fall. Put the gun in his hand. Highway 26 in front of Bendale Carpet.
We want truth. We want justice.
But when trees fired in no kind of way.
Billy Joe had an open casket after shooting himself. Supposedly was what gave shotgun.
Autopsy reports, everything that we supposed to have, they weren't willing to give it to us.
And I just felt like they were hiding a lot of stuff from us that wasn't adding up.
The only plausible and scientific explanation for this incident is that the Sears and Roebuck 12-gauge shotgun accidentally discharged.
Today on Reveal, we track down the doctor who performed the autopsy and show her something that calls everything into question.
Who wrote this? Is this a person who's trained at all?
But first, this news.
This is Asian View from NHK World Japan. I'm Eriko Kojima. Japan is urging China to lift its ban on imports of Japanese seafood. Beijing announced the policy on Thursday. It's in response to Japan's release of treated and diluted water from a crippled nuclear power plant into the sea. The discharge began earlier on Thursday. A Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson said Beijing firmly opposes releasing the water from the Fukushima Daiichi facility into the ocean. Japanese Prime Minister Kishida Fumio said Japan will ask China to hold science-based discussions involving experts. G7 foreign ministers have condemned North Korea's second attempt to launch a spy satellite. Pyongyang says it ended in failure on Thursday. The G7 ministers say the launch attempt was a clear violation of UN Security Council resolutions. South Korean military sources say Pyongyang may make a third try on October 10th. Some civil servants are being told to work from home as air pollution in the Indonesian capital of Jakarta steadily worsens. Authorities say the smog is a public health hazard. Hardly any rain has fallen in Jakarta and surrounding areas in the current dry season. Making the problem worse is the resurgence in economic activity as Indonesia shakes off the effects of the pandemic. Emissions from vehicles and coal-powered factories are up. Authorities are taking action, but some people say they're not doing enough.
I had inflammation for about 2 weeks, and after that, a cough and runny nose.
The government should reduce the amount of vehicles and increase the use of buses and public transport.
Indonesian authorities say they're promoting renewable energy and electric vehicles. We are broadcasting from NHK in Tokyo. Traditional Indian embroidery is in danger of dying out as many artisans give it up for better-paying jobs. A Japan-based business is trying to preserve this beautiful handicraft by creating new markets for it.
For 3 days each month, an old house nestled in the mountains transforms into a store. Its main products are embroidered clothes from India. Some items have intricate patterns inspired by plants, while others represent wishes for a family's happiness and prosperity. The embroidery reflects India's wide cultural diversity, with styles varying by region. Date Fumika runs a 3-day store in Hiroshima Prefecture and a similar shop in Nara Prefecture. Date first encountered the embroidery when she visited India in her student days. She says she was impressed by the artisan's skills, but saddened to learn many were giving up the work to take better paying jobs.
You know what? An embroidery artisan would suddenly become a driver the next day. I realized that this tradition was gradually being lost.
Date started a business commissioning embroidered items from India and selling them in Japan. She first offered the products at department stores, but people stayed home during the coronavirus pandemic, which made sales difficult. Date had more success with her next distribution channel. The 3-day stores allow her to reach customers directly and explain the meaning of each design and the artisan's techniques. Her stores now have repeat customers, and their word-of-mouth introductions are bringing in more.
Miss Date shares her passion for the products. I love to hear the stories behind them.
Last year, Date expanded her business to fair trade chocolate. It's made from cacao beans, imported from India and other countries. Indian embroidery patterns adorn the chocolate packages. Her seemingly incongruent product line has a purpose. She hopes the sweets will help pique customers' interest in embroidered clothes.
My business model may be inefficient, but I want to keep trying new ideas, focusing on important things for future society.
Date is planning to open more stores in other regions of Japan to introduce the age-old Indian handicraft to new markets.
This is Asian View from NHK World Japan. I'm Eriko Kojima.
Hello, I'm Nikki Beatty. Join me for this week's Arts Hour at the BBC. With two trailblazing creatives in their respective fields, comedian Subban Burma, one of India's biggest stand-ups and also a maverick in the world of entertainment, and Tendai Nyeke, one of the creative forces behind Kizazi Moto, the new Disney Plus animation series from Africa. That's all in the Arts Hour at the BBC.
Friday and Saturday nights at 10 on 91.7 WBXU.
From the Center for Investigative Reporting in PRX, this is Revealed. I'm Al Letson. It's May 7, 1955 in Belzona, Mississippi. It's a warm summer evening in the Mississippi Delta. The type of night where fireflies synchronize their light and lead a chorus of wondrous small things that fill the air. That simple beauty belies the tension that has blanketed the area. The Brown vs. Board of Education ruling has come down, and many white Southerners are not happy.
All the people of the South are in favor of segregation. And Supreme Court or no Supreme Court, we are going to maintain segregated schools down in Dixie.
Despite the overwhelming opposition to equality in the state, many activists put their lives on the line. Reverend George W. Lee became a successful businessman in Belzona and was a fiery preacher in the pulpit. He believed black folks' deliverance would come from God and getting people to the polls. That wasn't a small order. Racists tried to stop them from registering to vote by imposing poll taxes, literacy tests, and intimidation. But Lee was insuppressible. He passed their tests, paid their taxes, and when that didn't work, he took them to court. Ultimately, Lee was one of the first black men to register to vote in Humphreys County since Reconstruction. He founded the local chapter of the NAACP and was determined to get other black people registered. And that put him on the radar of white supremacist terrorists. They warned him to stop, but Reverend Lee would not be moved. On this balmy night, driving home from work, headlights flash in Reverend Lee's rearview mirror. Suddenly, a car pulls up beside him. Inside, a white man has a shotgun. Lee tries to get away, but the car keeps pace. The assailant looks at him, aims the weapon, and shoots several times. Witnesses hear the gunshots. the sound of cars on the road, and then a loud crash. Lee loses control and swerves off the road, running right into the porch of a nearby house. A young witness sees blood seeping out of the bullet holes in his body. Hours later, Reverend Lee will be declared dead. The county coroner is called to the scene.
And when a suspicious death was reported, the coroner would show up, and he or she would determine whether in fact the death was suspicious.
Tucker Carrington is the founding director of the Innocence Project at the University of Mississippi School of Law. He's helped free 7 wrongly convicted people from prison and is an expert on death investigations in Mississippi.
For decades, white Southerners fought integration and tried to preserve white supremacy with racial violence, most notably through lynching. Mississippi's death investigation system evolved into a powerful tool to help those atrocities.
And back in the 1950s, when Reverend Lee was killed, a coroner would typically just assemble what was called a coroner's jury.
And they would typically, for the jury, choose fellow white citizens. Now, this isn't anything as formal as a jury in a courtroom. Oftentimes, it was really nothing more than the coroner standing over or near the body, and sometimes, gesturing to people who might have been nearby, some of whom might have been quote-unquote eyewitnesses, and in virtually every case, of course, they would determine that instead of a suspicious death, the death had occurred of some non-suspicious nature, heart failure, accidental car crash.
That's what the all-white inquest into Reverend Lee's death concluded, an unfortunate car crash. Now, in Mississippi, the coroner is an elected politician. They don't have to have any medical experience. And in this case, the coroner didn't even have an autopsy performed on Reverend Lee. His family had hired doctors to do it privately. Those doctors found shotgun pellets in Lee's skull. The family confronted the sheriff with this new evidence. His response was pretty ludicrous. He said the shotgun pellets found in Lee's head were probably nothing more than tooth fillings. And this was like a normal practice in Mississippi at the time, correct?
It was not only a normalized practice, but it was part of a broader, sophisticated effort post-Reconstruction. Mississippi and other southern states enacted a host of measures to ensure, essentially, that African Americans remained almost as enslaved as they had been when they were in fact slaves.
The coroner and his jury transformed the murder of Reverend Lee from a lynching into a full-blown government conspiracy. No one was ever brought to justice for his murder. All of this may seem like a long time ago and can be dismissed as ancient history, but this was the basis for the system that is still in place today. This is Reveal's serial investigation.
Alabama's got me so upset. Tennessee made me lose my rest. Everybody knows about Mississippi. Goddamn!
Mississippi Goddamn. The Ballad of Billy Joe. We're revisiting a series we first brought you back in 2021. It spans 7 episodes of Reveal to tell the story of Billy Joe Johnson, a 17-year-old black high school student who died during a traffic stop with a white deputy in Lucedale, Mississippi. In the last episode, we talked about one theory that came out after Billy Joe died, that he might have taken his own life. His friends and family don't believe it, which brings us to episode 3, the autopsy. But before we get into that, we have to understand what was going on with Mississippi death investigations in the decades leading up to Billy Joe's death. In the 1970s and 80s, some reforms were passed. Those coroners' juries were abolished, and Mississippi set up a state medical examiner's office to investigate sudden, violent, or suspicious deaths and conduct autopsies whenever necessary. The coroner is still an elected position, but now autopsies must be performed by a certified forensic pathologist. In spite of all of this, the problems didn't go away.
long story short, the medical legal system in Mississippi throughout much of the 90s and into the 2000s was substandard. It was shot through with fraud. It was overworked. It was overpaid. People were making lots of money at the expense of the citizens of the state of Mississippi.
And the man who made the most money off the system was Dr. Stephen Hain.
If you died in Mississippi of any sort of suspicious circumstances, chances are Dr. Hain was going to be cutting you open.
Hain got so much work because no one was in the role of state medical examiner. That led to poor oversight of autopsies and a windfall for Hain. Between the 1980s and the early 2000s, he did most of the state's autopsies. One year, he claimed to have performed 1,800 of them. That's about 6 to 7 a day. Hain made about $1 million that year. And Tucker says Hain was a prosecutor's dream.
Turns out he wasn't qualified to be the medical examiner because he hadn't passed the required licensing, but he began to offer his services essentially at discount rates because he would do autopsies in bulk.
The Innocence Project and reporters began digging into Hain's work, and they turned up more problems.
A Wall Street Journal editorial accuses a former state medical examiner of making mistakes during his examination.
Mistakes that would lead to innocent people going to jail.
The editorial came after the Mississippi Supreme Court threw out the murder conviction of a 13-year-old boy because of Hain's testimony in the case. More of Hain's cases were overturned, including 2 high-profile murder convictions. The exonerated men spent a combined 33 years behind bars. The Innocence Project wrote letters to district attorneys in Mississippi asking them to go back and review all the cases that Hain had worked on. Not a single district attorney decided to do so. In 2008, the Department of Public Safety finally removed Hain from the list of approved medical examiners.
The problem with the Dr. Hain situation is that the state has refused to undertake a serious examination, not only of how this could have occurred, how we can prevent it from occurring in the future, but what damage did it do? Who was affected? Who's locked up? What cases remain unsolved?
In September 2008, just 3 months before Billy Joe's death, the Mississippi legislature issued a damning report. It concluded that the state medical examiner's office lacked the staff and resources to ensure that suspicious deaths could be resolved competently. And Tucker says that system disproportionately harmed poor black people in Mississippi.
The point is not that every elected official in Mississippi's criminal justice system was or is motivated by bigotry. Nevertheless, the system in which he, Dr. Stephen Hain, and the state's coroners operated was built on racism.
When Billy Joe Johnson dies in December of 2008, what's the state of the medical examiner's office at that point?
Well, it would have been the beginning of the end of the Stephen Hain era, and when the state was beginning to be confronted with the fact that it had a significant mess on its hands.
And so, would it be fair to say that it was in transition and things were kind of messy?
It was absolutely in transition. Things were still messy. They're still messy now.
With their go-to medical examiner gone, the state scrambled to find someone to do those autopsies. Ultimately, Mississippi hired a private company of forensic pathologists out of Tennessee. Dr. Adele Lewis was one of their pathologists. In December 2008, she conducted Billy Joe Johnson's autopsy. What she found would help convince the grand jury that Billy Joe's death was an accidental shooting. But questions have been raised about her findings.
The original pathologist actually did a pretty decent job in describing the injuries. So the error was in the interpretation.
That's after the break. You're listening to Review.
Support for Reveal comes from Odoo. Odoo is an all-in-one management platform built to help you control every aspect of your business from anywhere in the world. More information at odoo.com/reveal. That's odoo.com/reveal. And from NRC Health, helping healthcare systems focus on quality patient experiences, because consumers and healthcare systems tend to perceive quality in very different ways. Understand more at nrchealth.com/connect.
Support comes from the Joseph Clark Gallery, Arts of Africa in Northside, featuring traditional tribal arts and artifacts from sub-Saharan West Africa. Authentic pieces for purchase include masks, figures, textiles, jewelry, ritual objects, and more. The gallery also features original works by local artists and artisans. More at josephclarkgallery.com.
I'm Mary Louise Kelly. You may have heard that prices for used vehicles are up. Well, I bring this up because that car or truck you don't need anymore, it's probably worth more today as a donation than it was even a few months ago. So if you don't need it anymore, or if it's going to be too expensive to repair, why not donate it to this station? It's easy, it's free to you, and the proceeds help us bring you the news.
More information about car donation at wvxu.org.
From the Center for Investigative Reporting and PRX, this is Reveal. I'm Al Letson. In 2008, when Billy Joe Johnson's body arrived at the state medical examiner's office, things were a mess.